Now I see that our audience more and more are looking for information about education opportunities in China.
And in Uzbekistan, there are so many people who can speak Chinese. And they've studied in China. They know about Chinese culture.
Western media in general typically covers Central Asia through a lens of somewhat the ex-Soviet Union. And I think the Chinese media almost has an inverse narrative where it's a lot of talking about future partnerships, the Belt and Road Initiative, cooperation and opportunities between the Central Asian region and China.
My vision for China-Central Asia relations is one of deeper partnership built on mutual respect, cultural understanding, and shared development goals.
The Chat Lounge. Chat Lounge.
Chat Lounge.
The Chat Lounge unpacks views and opinions on hot issues in a more casual way.
Welcome to the Chat Lounge. I'm Xu Yawen. As we look ahead to the second China-Central Asia Summit in mid-June, we take this opportunity to explore the critical role of media in shaping and supporting regional cooperation. In a time of rapid transformation and geopolitical shifts, media has never been more important, not just in reporting news, but also in shaping how countries understand and engage with each other. So how can media in China and Central Asian countries serve as a bridge for understanding and trust? How can we promote a more balanced and objective global discourse about our region? Today, I'm honored to be joined by 4 media professionals from the region. They are Zhanna Shayakhmetova, Editor-in-Chief with the Astana Times in Kazakhstan; Utkir Alimov, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the International Relations Department at the Uzbekistan National News Agency; Kuvin, a contributor to the Times of Central Asia; and Xu Xinchen, a reporter with CGTN. So Zhanna, let me come to you first. When the word China comes up in your newsroom or in Kazakhstan, whether during editorial meeting or casual conversation, what's the first thing people tend to say or think about? I mean, either in trade, culture, or something else.
First of all, hello to everyone and nice joining your talks today. So that's a very good question. I think that our newsroom, we more refer to China as a strategic partner, not like for maybe any other countries who see China as a powerful trade partner, but we more and more see a shift from big projects our country has with China, railways or in a free trade zone and other sectors. We see that there's a big shift to people connection. I guess that's a very good thing. And now we see more and more China as a cultural and techno-influencer in our region, I guess.
Over the past few decades, as an editor-in-chief with Astana Times, so what's your observation on how the media has helped bridge cultural understanding between Kazakhstan and China? And has this changed how you see the relationship between the two countries?
Being as a, we say, fact-based newspaper and digital media, I've seen this trend that at first we served as a source for more official information about trade dynamics, about more projects in energy sector, in transport. But now I see that our audience more and more are looking for information about education opportunities in China, about visa and flight opportunities as well as tourism. So that reflects that our media now builds trust. Our media now also turned into more people-to-people connection. And I guess more and more local media, as I'm representing Kazakh media in English, I guess our local media that produces news in Kazakh and Russian, they have to also learn how to synchronize these narratives that comes on the diplomatic level, and they should be more attentive to deal with misinformation. As we see that over the course of the years, Kazakh-China relationship shifted from, as we say, tight elite circles to soft power efforts. And just have to see that shift also in the local media coverage, I guess. And I really like that our officials used to say that the whole region, Central Asia as well as China, Central Asia should not be seen in China's eyes as a landlocked or a land-linked, but a hub for connectivity, a hub for dialogue and cooperation. I guess this was also proved, for example, by President Xi's first visit after the pandemic. It was also cemented during the SEO summit last year, when Chinese president also announced that China and Kazakhstan, they have one vision: to build a future defined by friendship, by trust. I know that your media, SGTN, and other China companies, they do have relations with our government news sources. And I guess we should be now more attentive to what the narratives are in Kazakh and Russian language media.
Utkir and also Xinchen, so this is a question for both of you. We know recently you two participated in the Central Asia Expedition Media Tour in Uzbekistan ahead of the China Central Asia Summit, exploring areas such as trade, investment, infrastructure development, and also cultural exchanges. So Utkir, I'll come to you first. So from Uzbekistan's perspective, how useful is this media tour in promoting this people-to-people exchanges and strengthening our bilateral ties? And what kind of stories about China get the most engagement with your audiences back home?
First of all, greetings from Tashkent. I am so happy because you are inviting me to this CGTN meeting. The Central Asia Expedition Media Tour was a highly meaningful and strategic initiative for Uzbekistan. It provides an excellent platform to showcase our country's development, investment opportunities, and cultural richness to Chinese media representatives and influencers, especially in the lead-up to the China Central Asia Summit. From Uzbekistan perspective, this tour served to not only as a diplomatic gesture, but also as a practical mechanism for strengthening mutual understanding. Such as initiatives are vital for promoting people-to-people exchanges, which are the foundation of long-term bilateral ties. While state-level agreements create frameworks for cooperation, it is the human studies, shared experiences, cultural application, and dialogue that truly connect nations. The tour allowed Chinese media representatives to engage directly with local communities, entrepreneurs, and cultural sites, helping to build a more authentic and multidimensional image of Uzbekistan. Moreover, the visit opened doors for future collaborations in media, education, tourism, and trade, and others. It helped shape narratives that go beyond formal agreements, focusing instead on the everyday lives and expressions of people in both countries. That kind of storytelling is essential in building trust, encouraging investments in exchanging cultural curiosity. In short, the media tour was not just a promotional activity, it was a bridge of understanding that will have lasting diplomatic and social impact between Uzbekistan and China.
Xinchen, so you were also on the tour through the Central Asia. Were there any surprising moments or heartwarming stories that Chinese audiences might not usually hear about? Could you share some with us?
Absolutely. There are actually many things that kind of come to my surprise, just because this part of the world, Central Asia, sometimes can be very mysterious to Chinese people or not. And it was my first time to Central Asia and also my first time to Uzbekistan. Speaking of the Central Asia expedition, we have reporters from CGTN and also our media partners that will drive through Central Asia. So I personally we spent about 4 or 5 days in Uzbekistan, but we also have other teams of reporters visiting Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, just for instance. I need to say that we landed in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent, on just at the dawn when China and Uzbekistan expanded the visa-free policy to 30 days visa-free. So we could definitely see there is a strengthening ties between the two countries. And very interesting enough, I've been traveling around the world, a lot about world countries, a lot of time that I need to do my interviews in English just to kind of get around with that language barrier. And in Uzbekistan, there's so many people who can speak Chinese, and they've studied in China, and they know about Chinese culture. And another thing quite surprising, a lot of those in Uzbekistan, they also have this kind of desire to visit China, especially if we're talking about this is a mutual visa exemption policy between China and Uzbekistan. 30 days visa free, and of course there are smaller limits per se that people cannot stay longer than 90 days within a 180-day period. And if we're do business or we're going to do reports, I have my J visa, journalistic visa, to visit Uzbekistan. But again, for tourists, visa free, 30 days, and very convenient. And there are multiple direct flights from Uzbekistan to Chinese cities like Beijing, Urumqi, and Xi'an. Very, very convenient. And if we look at larger numbers between the two countries, and we're talking about infrastructure or new energy cooperation between the two countries. Trade ties between the two countries, it's about like $14 billion US, and it has been growing double digits for the past 4 or 5 years or so. But now that we do see a stronger momentum in terms of collaborating in new energy, and during our media tour that we'll visit this wind farm, founded and built by Chinese technology, invested by money investment from Saudi Arabia, and operated by the local people. And then Alimov and I that will visit the factory for BYD. BYD is a privately owned auto manufacturer specializing in NEVs. They built this gigantic factory in Jizak, and Jizak actually is the hometown for the current Uzbek president. And I can share more about this later on. But we do see that it's not just about regular trade investment, but also to push for sustainability and green energy, and of course, these cultural ties between the people from both countries.
That 30-day visa-free policy will definitely, I think, boost the people-to-people exchanges, regardless in trade, tourism, and other, as you said, energy cooperation.
Absolutely.
Then, Henry, let me come to you now. You are reporting on Central Asia from New York, and when it comes to things like reporting style, like stories they choose to focus on and how they tell stories, how do Western media cover the region differently compared to, say, Chinese and Central Asian media?
I think from my experience and my reading, Western media in general typically covers Central Asia through a lens of somewhat the ex-Soviet Union. So there's still a lot of emphasis on the Russian influence, such as stories from Semipalatinsk or the Aral Sea. But I've seen few stories about, local innovation, Kazakh culture, or voices that are ordinary to a certain degree. And I think the Chinese media almost has an inverse narrative where it's a lot of talking about future partnerships, the Belt and Road Initiative, cooperation and opportunities between the Central Asian region and China. I've seen a lot recently about the visa-free travel opportunities and how Kazakh citizens can use their banking system as Alipay in China to kind of allow the tourist process to be easier. I think that there is more of an effort on the Chinese side to highlight what is happening on the ground. For instance, the big trading hub on the border of China and Kazakhstan, Horgos, has received new innovation and investment from the Belt and Road Initiative, and we've seen that be covered to increase trade volumes and decrease the time that the cargo has to spend in transit, whereas I think there is a lack of coverage in Western spaces covering this.
The Chat Lounge. The Chat Lounge unpacks views and opinions on hot issues in a more casual way.
Zhanna, The 2025 China Central Asia Media Cooperation Forum was just held in Astana in late May, which marked a milestone in strengthening media collaboration between China and Central Asia. And we have also noticed that Kazakh President Tokayev praised the forum's role in enhancing mutual understanding, trust, and partnership in the media sector. So what are some outcomes stood out to you from this media cooperation forum, and what role do you think media cooperation play in promoting practical development between our two sides, China and Central Asian countries?
Media Forum is a good platform. Not only for journalists to meet, but also, I guess, to build new connections and network to connect with more with Chinese expert community, because through these people-to-people meetings, we can build a more trustful and reliable network and sources of information. At the same time, I guess that more and more Chinese journalists are ready to exchange stories and co-produce stories. For example, in our media, a few Chinese reporters have published their articles. I guess in these terms, it gives a lot of depth. It gives insights, and this also makes narrative for not to be one-sided, but it also gives perspective from Chinese partners. Overall, I guess in our country, the main mission of media is just to show that partnership with China is just to change people's perceptions about, because there was some kind of misinformation maybe, or some people's fears regarding land, other language issues. But I guess overall the recent research center, well known here, Talab, I know that they found out that Kazakh people overall perception of China is generally above neutral, so leaning more to positive. And I guess our media in this case play a very powerful role to create this image and to just to strengthen these partnerships. Like the Beijing, they just shift and adapt their policy to power to people dynamics, and as well as Kazakhstan.
Well, we'll talk more about misinformation and different narratives later in the program. In the meantime, Utkir, Uzbekistan is the most populous country in Central Asia, but many people in China still associate with the Asian Silk Road and its rich cultural heritage. So there is much less awareness of modern-day Uzbekistan, I think. So how can journalism or social media platforms such as TikTok help bridge that cultural gap and enable young people in both countries to better understand each other's culture and contemporary developments? Because I know TikTok is very popular over there in Central Asian countries, right?
You are absolutely right. While Uzbekistan is often associated in China with the ancient Silk Road and our rich historical heritage, there is still limited awareness of the vibrant modern country we are today. Journalism and social media have a critical role to play in changing this perception, especially among young people in both countries. First, storytelling must evolve beyond the past. While our story is a source of pride, media content needs to highlight contemporary Uzbekistan, our growing startup ecosystem, educational reforms, urban development, youth culture, and creative industries. Second, collaborative content creation is key. Joint media projects such as vlogs, mini documentaries, or podcast series featuring Chinese and Uzbek youth exploring each other's countries can create authentic, peer-to-peer narratives. When young people see others like themselves experiencing another culture with opinions and excitement, it encourages them engaging us well. Third, social media platforms are powerful bridges. Platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Douyin, Instagram, or can be used to share everyday stories, student life, local cuisines, fashion, music, and entrepreneurships from both countries. These micro narratives make distant cultures feel accepted and relatable. Finally, journalism can act as a cultural translator, not just reporting on events. In short, to foster deeper cultural understanding, we must shift the narrative from monuments to moments, real, lived experiences that connect young people through shared interests and modern realities.
Xinchen, you visited Uzbekistan this time, and based on your research and on-the-ground reporting, what are the most common misconceptions or knowledge gaps Chinese audiences have about Central Asia today? And maybe how can we, as media professionals, do a better job of telling the story of modern Central Asia to domestic audiences?
That's a very interesting question because as a CGTN reporter, and I always thought that our viewership is definitely broader. Is, for example, when we partner with WUZA, with the Utkir Alimov, that for our stories, we're not just intended to let the Uzbek or Chinese people to know more about our respective countries, but also to the world, let the world to know more about this, this part of Asia. And just like Harry mentioned about like Western media, sometimes they always have this kind of like love affair with the Soviet Union and really kind of focus on the Russian influence on Uzbekistan, for instance. But actually, when I visited Uzbekistan, Uzbek people speak their own language and they have their own culture, they have their own dancing, they have their own customs. And I've been telling this to all the people that I met in Uzbekistan that I was so jealous of them because when they speak one language, Uzbek, they can somewhat understand all the other countries easy or learn the other countries' languages. And for the younger generations, some of them they may not really learn Russian that much. But again, I do see for the 5 different countries in Central Asia, they're different culture, they're different countries. But again, they share their synergies. And speaking of like, there is a linkage between China and Uzbekistan that Asian Silk Road linkage. I met this kind of miniaturist, he paints. He paints this very famous kind of tableau painting in Uzbekistan. People can really find that souvenir very easy. For example, in Bukhara, one of the most Asian cities in Central Asia, that was our first stop in Uzbekistan. And he has been drawing so much inspiration from the Asian Silk Road, and he knows more about Zhang Qian, that Chinese who somewhat initiated the Silk Road, than I do. I think that's the linkage between the two peoples. And speaking of common misconceptions or knowledge gap between the two parts of the world, Chinese and Uzbek, I don't think, there's minimal, I believe so. Because when we visit, for example, Samarkand and Kashgan, those are larger cities in Uzbekistan. And we see so many tourists, young, old, group, or just individual travelers. And I did my research about Uzbekistan on Douyin, that's the Chinese version of TikTok, with real travel vloggers visiting Uzbekistan through the past few years. Because actually right now we have a 30-day visa-free policy between the two countries, but previously there have been like a week-long visa-free policy for many years. And Chinese people have been drawn to that part of the world of Central Asia. And I don't think there is much of a knowledge gaps, but this curiosity for Chinese people to know more about Central Asian neighbors, but Uzbekistan not really connected with China. But anyways, and I do see this media again. For example, from our experience with partnership with WUZA, we want the world to know what is happening on the ground in Uzbekistan with their efforts in terms of to reach sustainability, for its green transition, to look for alternatives. Wind power is very popular in Uzbekistan, solar and etc. And when we think about a Central Asian country, they are very, very rich in resources. A lot of gas, a lot of oil. But again, there are electric vehicles running in these countries as well. And of course, many of these electric vehicles or NEVs are China-made or from Chinese brands. But we do see these efforts. This part of the world is also paying its contributions to global development right now. It's a green transition.
Glad to see that China and Uzbekistan and also China and Central Asian countries are taking the leverage either in energy cooperation or in the NEVs. And also, Henry, previously we talked about the Asian Silk Road, where people normally, when we talk about Central Asia, we'll think about that's where the Asian Silk Road located. And you have reported on how regional cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative, especially in areas like infrastructure, green energy, and also cross-border trade, is impacting everyday life in Central Asia. So based on what you have seen on the ground, how are these major projects actually changing people's daily lives?
I think during my time on the ground in Kazakhstan, the changes from the Belt and Road Initiative are a little more subtle. And what I mean by that is it isn't something that you necessarily see every day, but you will see the impact of the projects over a longer period of time. And one I think that is important to highlight is the trade and logistics side of things. I've reported on the decrease in transit times from Horgos to Aktau on the western side of Kazakhstan, where then goods are put on boats and shipped to Baku, and then from Azerbaijan into Europe. And not only does that allow for more of an increase in trade between China and Kazakhstan, but it allows consumers to get their products sooner and be exposed to more products coming in from China. Not only does it help with trade, but it is also allowed for more job creation in Central Asia. Obviously, people are going to need to build these projects, and there have been a lot more people getting involved in construction just due to the sheer size of these Belt and Road projects. A lot of them are really big. And then back to Xinchen's point about electric vehicles, I don't think it relates directly to a Belt and Road Initiative project, but I was frankly very surprised to see so many Chinese electric vehicles and regular cars with engines in cities like Almaty, Astana, and Tashkent. The Chinese automotive market has really cemented itself in Central Asia. They provide very good safety, a good value, and are really competitive with traditional legacy auto manufacturers like Chevrolet or Hyundai. And I think that is something that I noticed on my first day. When I called a taxi, it was an electric BYD. And I think that is something that people will see almost immediately.
This is Chat Lounge. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we will discuss how to amplify the voices of China and Central Asia on the international stage. Stay with us.
Ever wondered what's actually going on in Africa through the perspective of an African? How are things really going between China and Africa? What's the narrative of this relationship? Well, get a perspective with China-Africa Talk. Hear from African diplomats, entrepreneurs, academics, Chinese natives, and more. Get on our wavelength every week to find out what's real with China-Africa Talk. Find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, and more. We'll see you there.
Welcome back to the Chat Lounge. Let's continue our discussion. Zhanna, so you're in Kazakhstan, and over the past decade, we have heard phrases like jointly building the Belt and Road Initiative and also a community with a shared future quite a lot. As a reporter closely following China-Kazakhstan cooperation under the BRI, has there been a particular story of reporting experience that really stood out to you, something that made you feel like this mega project actually bringing real concrete changes to local communities?
In these questions, I do agree with Mr. Henry Kuvin, because as reporters, we do like a lot of reporting about official announcements and meetings and summits where, of course, the BRI project that was, if I'm not mistaken, it was like launched 12 years ago, and its launch was like announced here at Nazarbayev University, and it was widely supported. Of course, for people and for media, it just stays like something like a project on paper, as we used to say. But we see that we do mostly report about Horgos dry port, and we see a big trade increase. And we see how this cross-border trade improved those areas around big cities like Shymkent and Turkestan. We see that the local administration body, how they improve transport infrastructure, and there are a lot of major also investments the government did in development of Aktau port in the West Kazakhstan. So overall, Khargos in the media landscape is now becoming not just a local trade hub, but a regional trade hub. Also an opportunity to create more jobs, also trade opportunities. BRI and these trade opportunities will help Kazakhstan to become more a transit hub where we can just use our dry and sea ports to transport more and more freights to Europe.
Utkir, from Uzbekistan's perspective, how do local people really think of this initiative? And also, we have often seen some Western media push the death trap narratives when they cover this initiative. So what's your response to that based on what you have seen and reported on the ground?
Yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative, also known as One Belt, One Road, is one of the ambitious international development and infrastructure projects of the 21st century. Launched by China's President Xi Jinping in 2013, an initiative aims to extend global trade and stimulate economic growth across Asia and beyond by developing trade routes reminiscent of the ancient Silk Road. For Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, the BRI presents opportunities for deeper economic integration with global markets. Uzbekistan has become a key transit country due to its strategic location. The initiative has led to improved transport corridors, energy projects, and cross-border trade mechanisms. Moreover, it has foreign investments, facilitated cultural exchanges, and helped modernize critical infrastructure such as roads and railways. For Uzbekistan, participating in the BRI aligns with the broader goals of becoming a regional logistics hub and diversify its economy. In Uzbekistan, public opinion about China's Belt and Road Initiative is generally positive, especially among communities that have directly benefit from improved infrastructure and trade and job opportunities. The initiative is seen by many such as a chance for economic growth and deeper regional cooperation. Local residents operated the railway and logistics centers which make transportation easier and more efficient. In areas near major infrastructure projects, people have noticed increased business activity, more foreign investments, and better access to markets.
Xinchen, the Belt and Road Initiative, even though it's proposed by China, its prosperity and outcomes belongs to the world. So when covering this initiative, some people would question whether China is self-praising. So how would you handle that in your reporting? And has that been a concern to you?
I think, being a journalist, if we hold the highest standards in a journalistic value, we tell the truth. And Western media can smear however they want. But the thing is that when we go to do interviews on the ground, for example, in Uzbekistan, these are real stories from the real people, the local people. Speaking of the wind farm that I visited, that's definitely BRI, because BRI is still kind of more focused on infrastructures or whatnot. I spoke to an engineer from Kazakhstan, a Kazakh engineer, and also a local Uzbek engineer. So we were driving in this China-made, it's a Chinese-branded electric vehicle, but it rolled off from the assembly line in Uzbekistan. And they were so proud of this job. And I even asked how their parents or their family think about it, because that Kazakh engineer, and she's a female, and very far away from her hometown. She said that her family misses her. But then being a part of this gigantic wind farm, it's the largest operating wind farm in Central Asia, built with Chinese technologies and a lot of Chinese methods. Her family supports her, and she can learn, she get good pay, and And that's real. That is happening. That's nothing that we're making it up. That's actually what is happening right now in Uzbekistan. And I think as long as it would tell the truth, and I think that's it. And that's about reporting on BRI. And of course, and if come back a little bit, speaking of those kind of state-backed Chinese investment, for example, China Energy built that wind farm. The local community has been so curious about wind power. The local elementaries would visit the wind farm. The teachers would ask them if the engineers, Chinese engineers, have the time to share what's special about wind farm and the technology behind wind farm to school kids. And a lot of those engineers, very busy and far away from home, they would find time and visit these schools and to share some basic technologies and basic things about wind farm, because wind technology is still very complex, I think, for little children. But again, in today's world, we're talking about, I'm a believer of global warming. I'm definitely a supporter for green transition, and we plant this seed between Chinese engineers and, of course, local engineers among young people. So it's not just about how much money or how much energy that a wind farm is producing, but it's about the future, about the sustainability. I mentioned again, Central Asia is very rich in resources, but again, one day it might run out. And for green transition also leads to digitalization. If we look at a partnership between China and Uzbekistan, digitalization is another key area for collaboration. And I was a little bit sad when I found actually paper bill is still very prevalent in Uzbekistan, because being used to paperless payment, cashless payment in China, we still have to take cash in Uzbekistan. But the good thing is, I think the central bank in Uzbekistan has signed this agreement with Chinese counterparts. One day Alipay, WeChat Pay, QR codes can also be applicable in Uzbekistan.
That's very exciting. Let's looking forward to that. Zhanna, so when we talk about Central Asia, we often hear narratives framing it as a focal point for a great power rivalry. What have you found in your reporting or research in regarding of this, and how would you assess China's role in the region?
In our newsroom, we do used to focus on what Kazakhstan chooses to do and not what others tell us to do. And we used to cover, as we say, regional diplomacy with vocal voices and local context. In that format, we see, and we usually present our country not just as an observer, but as a facilitator for dialogue and as a convener of dialogue, as we say, and core partner or co-creator, as we say, in multilateral dialogue between Central Asia and China as well.
Utkir, what are some misunderstandings or stereotypes you often see in international mainstream media coverage of China-Central Asia relations, and has the Uzbek media done anything to help clear up those misconceptions?
Absolutely. The idea that media cooperation goes beyond the content exchange and contributes to peace and stability is not just theoretical. It has very real practical implications. In practice, media cooperation builds understanding. When journalists and media outlets from different countries collaborate, they help tell each other's stories more accurately and with greater empathy. It reduces that risk of misunderstanding, misinformation, and harmful stereotypes that can lead to tension between nations or communities. For example, in regions like Central Asia, where countries have diverse histories, languages, media partnerships can shine a light on shared challenges and opportunities, from climate change and trade to youth development and cultural heritage. By highlighting this threat to youth challenges and opportunities, development and cultural heritage, by this media helps create a sense of regional identity and solidarity. Furthermore, joint media projects such as documentaries, youth exchange programs, or cross-border journalism training encourage dialogue and trust building. So while media cooperation may begin with content sharing, its broader impact lies in shaping narratives that promote mutual respect, dialogue, and ultimately peace and stability in the region.
I just have something to add as a writer, as a reporter. And I do just have all this being upset that our reports on water diplomacy, on green energy projects, on nuclear disarmament, and what not only our government has implemented to support this project, as well as non-governmental organizations do some efforts, as well as young activists. And all those stories, I guess, are just often goes underreported, especially in Western outlets, but they do get a lot of views from our audience in Asia Pacific, in China, in Japan as well. So I guess we just have to just focus more on our regional stories rather than wait and seek that approval, or I don't know, some more engagement from Western audience. That's just my personal opinion.
Xinchen, from a Chinese journalist perspective, so how can media professionals from both China and Central Asian countries work more effectively together to build a fair and balanced international narrative and to share the real stories behind China-Central Asia relations?
First, we need to get our hands dirty. We need to visit respective countries. And I visit Uzbekistan, and in the future, I hope that one day Utkir Alimov can visit China again. I can host him, and we can do all sorts of stories. I can be the local tour guide or whatnot, be the translator anyways. And I think that we also have to think about today the fast development of modern technologies. We're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about new ways for media to kind of really, expand media coverage. And I can still remember the day when we filmed our first joint production segment with UZA, that's the Uzbekistan National News Agency that Alimov works at. And immediately Alimov showed me the translation in English, in Chinese, in Uzbek, in Russian. And here in China, with CGTN, we also have over 80 different languages. And we immediately wrote out all these different versions of what we got firsthand on the ground. And we let the world know what's happening from those interviews, from those stories. And I think that's a way for future collaborations that we leverage on technology and we kind of try to kind of really narrow down that gap created by language barriers. And I think sometimes language can still be a tricky thing for the world to understand each other, for people, different races or different people from different countries to understand each other. But with modern journalistic technologies, and I think that's the way to go for us to bring better stories and a more internationalized narrative. And again, as I have mentioned, that we need to be on the ground. We need to find all these stories first. If we talk about a new media, fragmentations, fake news, but it's very important right now for news agencies like the UZA, like CGTN, or other, larger organizations that would keep that our journalistic value, that we go to the stories, we find the stories, and we share the story.
The Chat Lounge. The Chat Lounge unpacks views and opinions on hot issues in a more casual way.
All right. So we often hear people say that media cooperation goes beyond just the reporting, that it can actually help promote peace and stability in the region. How do you see that playing out in practice? And do you think there is any possibility for Western media to collaborate with Chinese and Central Asian media on that front?
Absolutely. I think in particular, Central Asia has a very unique opportunity right now to be that bridge between East and West. Obviously, geographically speaking, it is between the West and China and other Asian countries. But I think that it really comes down to being in person with each other and listening to each other's experiences and understanding each other from a personal lens, not just through the lens we are given by the media or social media. And I think that not only will this help to reduce stereotypes, but it will also bring focus to Central Asia. From my experience, a lot of people in the United States still don't know much about Central Asia. They hear a little bit about Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, maybe Kyrgyzstan, but If you ask them to name a city, good luck. But I think Central Asia in particular, and we're seeing more and more of this now, really has what it takes to be an international mediator for Western and Eastern countries, even other countries where we have less experience. And I think that we could all meet in Central Asia as it is such a viable alternative to any other major city while bringing light to a region that a lot of Westerners don't know much about. So I really think that there is a lot of great opportunity at educational institutions like Nazarbayev University or KIMEP in Almaty to host international summits, workshops, and cooperation seminars for everyone.
This is a question for both of you, Zhanna and Utkir. As we look ahead to the upcoming China Central Asia Summit in mid-June, so what kinds of cooperation outcomes are you most looking forward to see, particularly in the area of media cooperation?
The idea that media cooperation goes beyond content exchange and contributes to peace and stability is not just theoretical, it has a very real practice implications. In practice, media cooperation builds understanding. When journalists and media outlets from different countries collaborate, they help tell each other's stories more accurately and with greater empathy. In the future, I see media cooperation evolving from basic content exchange to becoming a dynamic platform for storytelling, collaboration, and innovation. Rather than just reporting on each other from a distance, media professionals from China and Central Asia can work side by side to create content that reflects authentic voices, diverse perspectives, and varied aspirations. For example, in regions like Central Asia, where countries have a diverse stories, languages, media partnerships can shine a light on shared challenges and opportunities from climate exchange and trade to youth development and cultural heritage. Furthermore, joint media projects such as documentaries, youth exchange programs, or cross-border journalism training encourage dialogue and trust building.
Zhanna, do you have anything to add?
I do hope that there will be, not maybe as part of this recent summit, but maybe there will be more like agreements and initiatives to focus more on journalist exchanges and maybe some, I don't know, bilingual training programs for journalists in order to learn how to, as you said, to create balanced stories. And that also will be like a practical engagement and the practical implementations. That will be like a good initiative maybe to launch some kind of China, Central Asia journalistic network, for example, where you can a digital content hub where journalists can like just co-publish verified stories, exchange multimedia, because as Henry even mentioned, nobody knows about Central Asia, but everybody knows about China. So that's an opportunity for us to build this partnership and to collaborate on many issues we want to talk about in our region.
Xinchen, we often hear the saying, like telling China's story well. But in the context of China-Central Asia relations, especially with the upcoming summit approaching, what perspective or angle would you take to tell the story of our shared development?
That's very interesting because, I'm a numbers person and I've been doing a lot of mega project stories. I've been doing documentaries and longer features on mega structures. I use a lot of numbers. I use new technologies to kind of visualize these numbers. But it's quite interesting when I visited Uzbekistan that I also covered this forum on June the 2nd. The second edition of China-Uzbekistan Regional Cooperation Forum. What I found out, the forum definitely was very heavy on the business side, but also they have this dedicated sector, speaking of, women development. And I found it's quite, during the summit that is happening very soon, and I do expect there will be agreements or new memorandums or signed between China and other Central Asian countries, not just about business ties or trade or economic development, but also about cultural exchanges, about people-to-people exchanges. And sometimes I think these angles can also be very interesting. I've been changing my perception of how my journalist career would be in the future. Definitely, I would still keep that number-driven analysis of collaboration between China and Central Asia.
As we wrap up this episode, I'd love to hear a final thought from each of you. If you had to sum it up in one sentence, what's your vision for China-Central Asia relations in the years ahead?
I think the future is very bright for Chinese Central Asia relations. I think that going on current estimates and based on current projects, that people will, in all regions of Central Asia, start to see the benefits more clearly if they haven't already. From logistics to consumer goods, there's been a very noticeable increase in both of those sectors. And I think that with cooperation and development between governments and universities, exchange programs, both cultures will get to know each other even better than they already do. And I think that is the best foundation for any stable relationship, is to really know each other and know each other's homelands and how societies function. So I think that the future already has a great foundation now, and I think it will only continue to grow.
Utkir, how about you? What's your vision for China-Central Asia relations going forward?
My vision for China-Central Asia relations is one of deeper partnership built on mutual respect, cultural understanding, and shared development goals, and media cooperation plays a vital role in achieving that.
Looking forward to more collaboration in the media sector between our two media outlets. So Zhanna, how about you? What's your vision for our bilateral relations going forward?
I hope that the media will become a platform, and not for just reporting, but for co-creating narratives and stories that connect, that inspire, and that are more focused on our region.
Xinchen, how about you?
We're definitely going to see more trade, more people-to-people exchanges, and more common goals reached between China and Central Asia. But as a journalist with CGTN, I do hope that for today's guests, we have Henry, Zhanna, and Utkir visit China one day, and we can make something fun about China also. And hopefully in the future.
That's indeed a great suggestion. Yeah, take the advantage of the 30-day visa-free policy. So with that, we're wrapping up this episode of Chat Lounge. Let's continue to tell stories that connect our people, reflect our realities, and help shape a more inclusive and balanced global media landscape. Thank you to our guests for an insightful discussion. I've been speaking with Zhanna Shayakhmetova, Editor-in-Chief with the Astana Times in Kazakhstan, Utkir Alimov, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the International Relations Department at the Uzbekistan National News Agency, Henry Kuvin, contributor to the Times of Central Asia, and Xu Xinchen, reporter with CGTN. I'm Xu Yawen. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.
Once upon a time, in a land not so very far away, stories were told of the brave and the bold.
The whole court fell silent to hear what the great warrior Mulan might ask for.
Of mighty deities and powerful immortals.
Immediately, the shimmering skin started to grow before his eyes.
Of fated love and love sanctified.
In dawn's golden light, Niu Lang said,
"Marry me."
Of great journeys across fantastical landscapes.
So the cat and the mouse climbed on the dog's back, and the dog swam across the broad river.
In the company of friends and enemies and unimagined beasts.
Hello there. Good to see you.
Of ordinary folk with tantalizing stories to tell. Heroes and heroines all.
It's incredible. How did you do that?
Tales of sad sacrifice and victories snatched from the jaws of defeat. stories of the wise, the accomplished, and the quick of mind. 5,000 years of amazing Chinese folk tales. You'll find Chinese Folk Tales Season 3 wherever you discover your favorite podcasts.
The best military commander is not he who fights 100 battles and wins every one of them. The best military strategy does not lead to the desiccation of the enemy's capital city. Decoding the Art of War will help you understand why there's no art in war and how Sun Tzu stayed undefeatable using the science of war, with fun stories and insightful breakdown of famous battles. Find Decoding the Art of War wherever you listen.